Okay, we are now live. We're having a couple of technical issues, so everyone's just going to stay muted for a moment whilst I'm doing the introductions. But let me put the usual message in the comments so people know to say hi. But I'm very excited about today as we're kind of continuing on our series of looking at each adverse childhood experience individually. I'm joined by some of our favorite stars from these live streams to talk about emotional neglect today. I think we've got a couple of people joining us already. Hi, Sheila. I don't know if you guys are all able to see the comments as well as we do these lives, but we've got Will joining us too. A couple of people coming in. Got some waves, people. I do apologise for having everyone else on mute, but we were getting feedback from my mic, so I will shut up very soon and let everyone else join in. Got Yvonne joining as well, Leslie joining as well, getting a few people coming in. Wonderful. So yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll very quickly share just the intro slides to this live stream so that we can say hello to everyone else. So we're going to be talking today about emotional neglect, one of the two types of neglects that are kind of included in the 10 adverse childhood experiences. And as usual, we will be connecting it up to a much broader picture as well, as these things rarely happen in isolation. Now, because we're going to be talking about experiences that many of you might have experienced, or you know people who have experienced, this could be triggering in some way. If that does happen, we kind of suggest 3 different things that you can do. The first is to just ground yourself back into the present moment. Maybe take some deep breaths in and out. The second is to really remove yourself from the situation for a moment. Maybe get up, stretch your legs, get a glass of water. And if that still isn't enough, and this is relatively rare, especially as I'm sure you'll have lots of support from people in the comments and from Hearts of Ace, do reach out directly. You can reach out to me at idawson@wavetrust.org or Anthula within our charity, who also is both a staff member at Wave and a member of the Hearts of Ace group there. And if you want more direct, immediate support, you can also call the number there to the side from a wonderful charity that supports adult survivors of all kinds of abuse and neglect. So I think I'm going to finally shut up here and let all of the wonderful people we have on today do a quick introduction and what they're really hoping that you can all take away from today's session. Rob, do you want to kick us off?
Sorry, I couldn't find the arrow. Couldn't find the little arrow. Hi, I'm Rob. I live down in Devon. I've been a member of the 7030 since 2015, and I'm a member of Hearts of Ace. Mostly about getting recruitment and getting people to be a part of the drive that we're sort of growing within Hearts of Ace. So that's me, and I'm a 54-year-old male who suffered quite a lot of adverse childhood experiences, and I'm glad to be a part of this today, and I'll hand over to one of our other guys.
Thanks, Rob. Jay, do you want to go next?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us. I'm Jay Haston. I'm a 43-year-old, and also, like Rob, I'm a member of Hearts of Ace, the peer support group, which is fantastic, and I recommend anybody to check us out and find out what we're all about, and the lives will explain some of it as well. Personally, for me, what I hope you're going to take away for this is that how bad emotional neglect is, and how also it can be inadvertent. And there's sometimes, like even now, personally myself, I'm going through some stuff, and I'll explain again later how we can make sure that we're emotionally available for our children now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay, and I'm sure I will be coming back around to that in questions. Claire, do you want to finish off on the introductions?
Hey guys, I'm Claire, I'm 40 from Wales. I'm the head lead ambassador for the Wave Trust, the 70/30 campaign, and I'm also a member of Heart of Ace. And I'm on this meeting tonight just to try and spread awareness and prevention of these issues, and to make people aware of what emotional neglect means, which is something I learned really later on. Yeah, and I'm just hoping to spread some light really, and to talk about some issues that are really close to my heart.
Thank you, Claire. And I'll just say a quick hello as well, in case some of you are joining these live streams for the first time. I'm Isabel. I've been working for Wave, or been involved as 70/30 ambassador for nearly 7 years now, I think 7 years in August. And I've been involved in all kinds of roles, from 70/30 ambassador to setting up trauma-informed communities. And I'm currently the project manager for police and criminal justice as well. And I'm still taking the lead on a lot of our social media side, hence many of these live streams. So I think before I get started with specific questions, what I'd really like to do is share screens for a couple of moments, just because I think it's important to understand exactly what we mean by emotional neglect, as this is one of the adverse childhood experiences that is easier to be invisible. It's easier to really not understand is happening to you in quite that same way. So, as we said, this is all taken from another charity that I'll get to in just a moment, and there'll be the name and the link there. But this is really feeling that you don't have someone to rely on emotionally, not feeling loved, not feeling important or special, not having someone who's looking out for you, and not feeling supported. And it can often be the hardest ACE to really identify from outside of these family dynamics. So I really want to make sure that when you're leaving today, you understand that it can have just as devastating an impact as some of the other adverse childhood experiences when not supported. This often happens because the caregiver can't connect with their child, and this is something that Jay was hinting at. That's not necessarily that they can't connect because they don't want to. There can often be many, many situations in their lives that are making it really hard to happen. For example, mental illness, or substance addiction, or many other reasons that I'm sure we'll get into in more detail today. And I really want to make it clear that basically what it means is that your emotional needs aren't being met. And I've got a couple of videos to show you later as well as what it means to meet these emotional needs. So it's crucial to understand, though, that we need our emotional brain to develop to lay the groundwork for the rest of our brains. So that need for love is as important as the need for food and the need for shelter. And I think we'll get into the fact that sometimes that drive to look for that connection, if it's unmet in childhood, can lead to different types of vulnerability later in life as well. And finally, I really want to say that it just takes one person to be an always available adult within the family to make a huge difference in a child's life. And we'll be looking at exactly what that means later on as well. But it really only takes one safe place in a child's life for them to be able to start to cope with all of the adversities that might come their way. And as I said, this is all these definitions and things you can find at the Stop Abuse campaign. So with a bit of a clearer idea of what we have in mind when we're talking about emotional neglect, I'd love to hear from all of you guys what you think is the most misunderstood part of emotional neglect. And I don't know who wants to go first. So I'm happy to have you either raise your hand or unmute or see what you're going with. Yes, Rob.
I think it's trying to understand the differences between neglect and abuse, to be honest. I think there's such a different end, because I know myself that as much as I felt that what I was going through my childhood, because there was a lot of influences in my childhood. There was a lot of alcohol, there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of violence, there was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of shouting. And the thing is, while all this was going on, I was being neglected. I should have been playing games. I should have been taken to the park to play football. I should have been sat down and read a book with. I shouldn't have had to witness that part of that world. But I think for me, it was feeling that my whole life I'd been abused, when actually there was a huge amount of it was neglectful from my parents, which obviously growing up into an adult, I wasn't given the skills to become an adult because there was no one emotionally at home saying to me, actually, this is how you learn by your mistakes. This is how you do something wrong. This is how you repair doing wrong. It was, there was a lot of blame culture in that house. If I'd have done, I was a naughty boy. I was really naughty. In fact, I was a little sugar. And I tell you what, I know I was. It doesn't necessarily mean that I deserved to go through them things, but this blame culture that carried on. And do you know what? Even at 54, it's still carrying on within that family threshold. It's because nobody wants to take responsibility. And it didn't enable me to take responsibility for my own actions as I grew up to become an adult. As a parent, my brother and I, we have both, and my sister, we've all taken responsibility for our actions, and we teach our children how to be responsible adults by giving them the time, being emotionally involved in their life, picking them up from school, meeting them from school, meeting them with a smile as apart from a mobile, cuddling them, telling them we love them, reading a book and, don't necessarily pick out the faults, but pick out the great things that they do from reading, from picking a book to falling asleep with the book. I think so I'm going to draw back a little bit there. It's noticing the difference between emotional abuse and neglect and understanding the difference.
I think that's a really important distinction, Rob. So thanks for starting us off on that. I think that it's often very hard to not have some form of emotional neglect in situations of severe abuse with different things going on, because it's obviously very hard to meet someone's emotional positive needs when there's many things going against that and making a child feel unsafe. But it is fully possible for someone maybe not to have those sides of things and still be emotionally neglected in some way. And it's very important to understand the distinctions and what the differences is. And I think many people, including some of the people within Hearts of Ace who aren't joining us today, had some of that overlap of the fact there might be emotional abuse as well as emotional neglect or different things. And I'm sure we will do a live stream on emotional abuse and different types of abuse further down the line as well. I think we've already done one on physical abuse that people can check out if they want to. Just quickly, before moving on, I just saw a message in the chat saying from Donna, who was supposed to be joining us today, that she was sad she couldn't make it. So I just wanted to say a quick shout out there. I'm sure we'll be able to have you on a future live stream as well. And thank you so much for the support there. Claire, do you want to take a crack at the question of what's most misunderstood about emotional neglect?
Yeah, definitely. I know for me, I didn't even know emotional neglect really existed until about 3 years ago when I was reevaluating my life. I grew up in a nice home with a safe parent, and then unfortunately my mum lost her mum and I lost my safe person, and there was domestic abuse and violence in the home and just a lot of anger, and I didn't really even know about emotions. I just remember feeling really sad all the time and not having anybody to talk to. I had mental health issues at young age. I had ADHD that was undiagnosed, which is only just being diagnosed now. And I just felt very misunderstood and I didn't know where to put those feelings. And then obviously I went on to have my own children quite young. I was 15 when I had my first daughter. And we weren't really taught, cuddles and love and I love yous and all those things. So then that went on in turn then for me to just continue the cycle with them. And even though I was there every day from the moment they were born up until a few years ago when they left home, I was in the house, but I wasn't emotionally present. I was just living my life in survival mode every day, just trying to get through each day as best as I could so I could make it to the next one. And unfortunately, my older children got left to their own devices a lot. We didn't have day trips because I couldn't leave the house. We didn't really have friends over, and I wasn't really there to be able to solve problems because I couldn't really solve problems of my own, so they didn't really come to me. And I know with my little one now, since I've started my recovery and I'm becoming more self-aware and I'm doing all the work I'm doing on myself, I'm now able to be that safe parent for him, where when he's having a meltdown, he's got somebody to come to who's going to just sit with him in his feelings and let him know that everything's going to be okay. I'm there to read those stories every night and play. And I wasn't sadly available to do that with my older children. So, yeah.
Thanks, Claire. And I think that that theme of kind of the impact on your own parenting is going to come through in different ways. I know Jay wanted to touch on that as well later today. And I'm just going to touch on what you said there about, Claire, about being in survival mode. I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that we often talk about, when we're talking about, say, trauma-informed organisations, that you need to have an element of self-care. You need to be looking after yourself, because when you're in that kind of burnout or survival mode or vicarious traumatised state, you can't really be emotionally present with another person. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so important to provide support to families that are struggling with the many of different issues that you mentioned there, Claire, but not limited to that. And understand that it's not necessarily someone's fault that they're not in that situation where they can immediately provide that emotional support to a child, but that they need external support to get them to that stage, and they need the knowledge to then be able to do that.
I learned to disassociate from my feelings at a very young age. So, yeah, that was my way of coping, just disassociating from the whole thing and just trying to just numb down the pain of what I was going through.
I think that's a very, very common reaction to trauma and ACEs. And I think that can often also stem from not having had that emotional support at the emotional development stage. You weren't taught ways to regulate your emotions as well.
Yeah,
and sometimes emotions can be so overwhelming that dissociation is still such a powerful tool.
But the sad thing about that is then, because I was doing that, I then went on to show my children how to do that. So the cycle just continues on.
Well, it will stop with you this time, Claire. I know the amazing work you're doing now. So definitely give yourself some credit there. Jay, did you want to come in on this question as well? I think I might share some videos next after that.
Yeah, it's like Rob and Claire have said, it's about understanding emotional neglect and the difference between emotional neglect and abuse, and also the difference between intentional emotional neglect and inadvertent emotional neglect. For example, I'm just about to turn 3. I've got a secure attachment with my mum, with my dad, so good, so healthy, and then boom, my dad's killed by somebody in the family. By proxy, my dad's then emotionally neglected me for the rest of my life. I've instantly lost my father. I've instantly lost my father figure. So that's inadvertent emotional neglect. My mum was obviously traumatized. So she was traumatized. She did her best. Right now, my mum's like, she's my rock. She's even though she's going through such a hard time, and she done a great job raising us and bringing us up. But for a partner to be killed by somebody else in the family, that must have played a huge impact on her, and it certainly had a knock-on effect on myself as well. But it shows how it's inadvertent, and then that also leads on to now as an adult. Now I'm battling depression, battling grief, and I'm having to be, like Claire said, self-aware. I'm needing to be self-aware, because I know that if when I'm isolating and I withdraw from everybody, I'm not there for my kids. So I'm unintentionally not there for my kids. So I need to try and manage that best I can and be there for my kids. And sometimes that can mean even having to put a mask on sometimes. But it's about learning that it's about, for me, the takeaway hopefully is that people understand that the differences between these the complex issues.
Absolutely, Jay. And I think that kind of awareness is a very important first step. And I think understanding in a moment when it's like, this is difficult, but actually I know why it's important and how it's impacting other people can be a big step. But I really don't want to minimize as well some of the impacts that things as big as bereavement and depression can have on people, as I'm sure you won't be the only person who's unfortunately struggling with similar things. So I think it is also important to acknowledge the very real struggle and how important it can be to have support around you in those moments. I think what I will do next is I have a couple of videos that I'd love to share that really show how we can positively support children's emotional development. and some of the impacts of the neglect side as well. We've got one video that we always share in our trauma-informed training, actually, on attunement between a parent and child. And then another video that talks a little bit more just about still attunement, but in slightly different language that you might have heard of, serve and return as well. So I'm going to try and just share this, and you'll hopefully not get any feedback. If Jay, I might just nominate you. If you're able to jump up and say if there's any technical issues and people can't hear it, and just let me know, that'd be great.
To a child's future development is emerging here at Dundee University.
So what we're going to do is get you just to interact with Fraser, just as you normally would with him sitting here and kind of smile and talk and things like that. And then
Dr. Suzanne Zeedyk has spent the past 6 years trying to understand what babies need for healthy development. The latest research shows that it's the quality of interaction between a child and a carer that's crucial, particularly during the first year.
Okay? Okay? All right. Oh. So if you see, we've got this looking conversation going on. Baby's looking at mom's face, eye gaze is really tight, smiling, really intense kind of looking here. Okay, so we've got a conversation going on. Hi, Lisa, good. What the baby is getting from this kind of interaction is it's learning that that what it's doing has an impact on what other people are doing, so that when it looks at mom, mom looks back at it. That's the sort of thing that, although it looks very, very subtle, it doesn't look like a lot, it's these kinds of things that are crucial to interaction at this age.
To show how a child's sense of well-being is dependent upon the quality of interaction, Dr. Zeedyk has asked this mother to stop responding to her baby. The child's reaction demonstrates what happens if it does not receive this kind of stimulation.
So here, mom's face is now being held still. She's not responding to what the baby's doing. And you can start to see the discomfort in the baby. See how it looks away? It now looks really withdrawn and kind of despondent. It checks back with mom. She doesn't smile. It tries. It even tries a smile. She doesn't respond. Its smile goes away. The baby's looking down. It's not even trying to interact. If this goes on and on and on over a long term, you're going to get a withdrawn child who doesn't understand that other people will interact with it. And if it doesn't understand that other people interact with it, you don't have a healthy person.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better idea of what happens in emotional development, really, at that really, really early stage when you're laying the foundation of emotional development, in a sense. And I think that video really shows the difference, even for a child who's used to positive interactions, that moment where there isn't a connection and how big an impact that has. And I will say, that's not to say that you have to be on 24/7, but the more you repeat an experience, the more that becomes hardwired in your brain. So if you just continually do not connect to your parents for whatever reason, or to your caregivers, that does eventually really start to have repercussions. I think before I share my next video, I might just love to hear some comments on that one from you guys, as you might have some insights. Rob, I see you've got your hand up there if you want to go.
Do you know what? This is something I've been working on for a very long time. I was, interestingly, I've got a brother and a sister. My sister's on here, Michelle, that's my sister. What's interesting is my parents, my real father and my mother separated when I was a baby. I wasn't even aware of that moment. So at that time, obviously, I've got a sister who's 4 years older and a brother who's 6 years older. So the feedback I get is from them when I was a baby. So it's during that time of separation where there was a lot of anger, there was a lot of fighting, and there would have been a lot of neglect emotionally, because my mother was always running away or going somewhere else. It's moving, and we were moving around. And so I think when it comes to my brother and sister, as much as we all felt the pain, I think mine was more deep rooted because I had it from the beginning of my eyes being opened. You know, that. So I think we all feel it, but we all feel it quite differently. And that neglect from a child, from that not having that emotional involvement with parents, you know, as much as my real father may have wanted to, I was sort of ripped away from him and taken off with a strange man. and this woman who wasn't emotionally involved with me. So as an adult, it's impacted in how I formulate relationships, because 3 failed marriages. I struggle in relationships because I don't know. I've stemmed from very early years of not being able to have the skills to formulate relationships.
I think you've touched on something critical there, Rob. There are windows of opportunity during which our brain is really focusing on specific skills. Now, obviously, you could be emotionally neglected at age 12. You could be emotionally neglected at 18. You could be emotionally neglected at age 3. You know, there's all that difference. But there are moments in which your brain is focusing on specific functions. And that key initial foundation for emotional development is happening in the first 18 months of life. That is when you have the biggest impact. And the second impact is probably around adolescence. Now, all of childhood is hugely impactful. You know, I think we can all agree that if that happened to you throughout your childhood versus, say, your parents or whatever not being emotionally unavailable, you know, when you're 25, 26 is no longer going to have any kind of similar impact on you. But I think it's really important to know, for example, within families, you might have siblings who are impacted by family issues in different ways. You know, if there's been a separation that is time sensitive, if there's been a bereavement that's time sensitive, if there's been, you know, all of those different situations, it will impact children in different ways. And I think it's really worth acknowledging that. Jay, Claire, did you want to jump in on that before we shared the next video after? Claire, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when my eldest kids were younger, I didn't really know about that attunement. I'd only been taught the basic skills of, you know, feeding, clothing, making sure they're clean, looking after them at a general level. And I didn't really spend that time with them.
It's cut out, Claire. I'm not hearing you anymore. No, not sure what's going on there. Yeah, if you come out and come back, we'll save the question for you. Jay, while she's sorting out any technical issues, do you want to comment?
Yeah, you know, when you feel invisible as a kid, you know, I often say that I think trauma has a laugh with me and just winds me up, because, you know, at crucial stages, things have happened. Like last year, my brother dies on my birthday. You know, 3-year-old. It's a crucial stage of attunement, and to lose my father, and for my mum to be traumatized at the same time. I now see how that's impacted me in many ways in adulthood. And one of the biggest ways, I think, was for a long time I had to be, you know, I had to be seen. I had to be the man. I had to be the daft one, the crazy one, or I had to be the show off, the clown. I need to be seen, which is even still evident today. And it's even the stuff I do for Wave. I know that it's that lost wee boy who didn't feel safe, and mostly that goes down to what happened with my granddad and what he done to me. But the emotional neglect side, you know, it's you feel invisible, and when you've not got anybody that you feel you can turn to because you feel threatened, then all that comes out as an adult, as a, you know, see me, you know, acknowledge me, you know, pat me on the back, tell me I'm good enough, and nothing ever comes across that way. And that's one of the severe impacts of emotional neglect, you know, and that a lot of that's in there, and emotional neglect.
Absolutely. I think we said at the very, very beginning of this live stream that, sorry, Jay, I'm just going to mute you because I think I'm getting a bit of feedback. I think we really said at the beginning that it's a crucial need, in the same way that food and shelter are. And obviously, if that need isn't met, you will look for ways for it to be satisfied later in life as well and throughout your life. So I think that's really, really important. Claire, did you want to finish your thought on not being taught about attunement when you were a parent?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I was stuck in a home with 2 small children. It was a very violent atmosphere, and I just basically didn't have time to do what I had to do. And then when I realised years ago what was actually going on and the damage I'd caused, and I got pregnant for the little man, I realised that I had to change this around. If I was going to do this again, it had to be done properly. and I had to make sure that I had the correct skills to bring him up, basically. And that attunement that I've got with him, it's just been a whole totally different positive experience, and I feel really guilty about not having it all those years ago. But I was just a child when I had my children. I was still a child myself, but it's had a real positive impact. And even with my grandson now, that attunement is so important, to be able to spend that quality time and be there emotionally when they need you, and just be able to be there. Yeah, it's been massive.
Thanks, Claire. And I think, yeah, I think that's evidence of really what a difference education around these things can do. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're doing the live stream today. There might be many people on here who don't know the importance of attunement, who don't, it's all well to say, are you emotionally neglecting someone? But if you don't know what someone actually needs, what those needs are, it's very hard to meet them. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to share these videos with you today. I'm going to attempt to share another one with you. This is on a slightly different setting, so please bear with me and let me know if there's any technical issues. But hopefully it will all work. Hopefully you can all see that. Let me know if there are any issues.
We're now learning about the many ways in which solid brain foundations are built and maintained in a developing child. One important way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across the net, various forms of communication pass between the two, from eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo.
The child serves or indicates they're interested in something. The adult who's attentive to that child returns that interest, and that ramps up the child's enthusiasm, and they do the activity again. So when they're learning to read, the child shows an interest in a book. The adult sees that and reads to them. The child gets all excited and tries reading back. And then the child's using those circuits that underlie reading over and over again, driven by the enthusiasm of the interaction with the attentive adult.
The response and attention a child receives from an adult when they are practicing certain social, emotional, and physical skills goes a long way to sparking that child's own excitement with learning and repeating certain actions.
The child gets positive feedback from the adult, and they try harder, so they're using that circuit again and again. That circuit will really be sturdy and will form a sturdy architecture for later life function.
In order to build these sturdy circuits in a developing brain, it's crucial for caregivers to actively engage with the child. Prolonged passive activities, such as leaving a child alone in front of a television or merely holding the child without eye contact, will not build solid brain architecture.
Without serve and return attentive adult interactions, the child's much less likely to undertake a lot of these activities, and their brain won't develop as well.
Serve and return interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development.
So hopefully that came through all right for everyone to see. And that's somewhat just repeating what we said in the previous video, but I think explains it slightly differently as well and gives you other language that you might have come across when talking about adverse childhood experiences. And I think it also shows different ways in which we might want to consider even more trivial stuff like what all of us working from home during the pandemic might have done, et cetera, et cetera. You know, these are things that if we're talking about inadvertently happening is something to consider. And again, I'm going to really highlight, children don't need you 24/7 at that full attunement constantly. That isn't a standard that any human being is capable of being at. But it is about what is their norm, what is happening most often, what's happening again and again and again, and really reinforcing those circuits within the brain. Do any of you have any comments on that video that you'd like to share before I ask any kind of follow-up questions?
I think for me, I had a sort of late diagnosis of ADHD as an adult, so I was already having some underlying issues as a child, put down to I grew up in a time when I was just a naughty boy, you know, who had no boundaries, but I didn't have any boundaries because I wasn't taught to have boundaries. You know, it's interesting to say about eye contact, and it's always, I don't know, when I was younger, I'd really reluctant to give eye contact, but as an adult, I've focused more religiously on eye contact. It's the thing I do. Do you know what I mean? To the point where it's sort of, I give it that 3 or 4 seconds, then I look away and then I come back, because actually it's not about people seeing my eyes, about how I trust others by their eye contact. And about how, and I tend to sort of spend more time trying to read people's faces or trying to understand their body language. I mean, it's a part of my job role as well. But yeah, I think for me, that whole interaction between parent and son wasn't there growing up. I was just left to my own completely left to my own devices. I grew up with a kiss with a fist was better than none, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to sort of go back to the video now, because I think I just went off on a tangent. But yeah, for me, I've become an adult when I've learnt the skills I should have done when I was a teenager, but for some reason, I've got an older daughter where I was completely and utterly absent for her. Completely, I was not there. I just abandoned. And I may have other children who I've also abandoned because I just wasn't there. I wasn't emotionally, because I wasn't mature enough to, you know, I thought it was a bit like you could go to the shop and just take it back because you didn't need it at that moment. But it wasn't until a time when I suddenly had this, yeah, with my son, and it's just pure love. It's that, and and I feel quite proud that one thing I have done is broken that cycle completely. It's severed. I'm broken, gone. That, but it doesn't stop me feeling that every decision that I make makes me feel guilty that I'm making the right decision, and it doesn't make me stop feeling that actually, am I doing the right thing? So I tend to watch other parents a lot of the time and thinking, I'm doing better than them, or I should be doing that. Yeah, I feel very lucky, but actually, I don't want Noah to be my teacher, but because I'm the parent. So I know I hear people say, "Oh, he teaches him so much," because I need to be the parent, and actually, and I think one of the issues I struggled with was boundary setting, because I didn't have boundaries as a child. I was just told, I just went off and did it, and then I was punished. So my way of looking at it was, I'm going to get hit anyway, so I might as well carry on doing it, and then I'll just get a full walloping, you know, where it's sort of, my son, I'm giving him the lessons before he even does it. Mm-hmm. You know, I made the mistake where Noah, I'm teaching him how not to.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I think I've got 3 different things I kind of want to pick up on from that, Rob, because I think you've brought some brilliant discussion points that we all need to be aware of. The first one I'm going to pick up on is just what you were saying about the eye contact, because I think it's really important to understand that neurodivergence does play it has a really interesting relationship to ACEs and trauma. We know that people who are neurodivergent tend to have more ACEs, but we also know that people with more ACEs are more likely to become neurodivergent. So it's a dynamic that hasn't been fully explored in research yet. But one research that I did see was, for example, that autistic children who really develop socially differently still need attunement. It's just that what attunement looks like might be different. So it might not be the eye contact necessarily, but it might be understanding them at their level, following their interests in different ways, etc. But they do still need that attention. They do still need the parent to make the effort to make sure that their emotional needs are met. It might just mean something a little different to what we're used to. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that that isn't just kind of a one-size-fits-all blanket statement. Only going to quickly touch on, but I'll let Claire and Jay pick it up again if they want to, what you said about comparing yourself to other parents, because I think this is something that gets done a lot, both implicitly, but also kind of in a societal level. in a way that I think can actually be really harmful, especially when it's done on that societal level rather than kind of an implicit, own insecurities, because it really is a case of, were you taught, were you supported, were you given the tools to be the best parent, A, and B, we often don't get to see exactly what's happening in terms of everyday parenting apart from small snapshots into other people's lives. So I really want to say I'm giving you all my admiration to all three of you for the effort you're putting into really breaking those cycles and being there for your kids, because I've seen what a huge difference that's making. And the final one, I'm just going to really highlight it. I think I'll come back to it after I ask Jay and Claire, is the boundaries. I think we need to have a more in-depth discussion about boundaries in a moment. But Jay, Claire, did you want to come in on the video before we go into that?
I think it was a good illustration of what attunement is and how it can be instilled and how it can also be missing as well. And it explained to the audience the implications that we're missing as well. So I thought the video was a really good illustration. It's similar to Rob, I didn't have a dad, so I didn't know until I was 12. My mum met my dad Rab, and I didn't know how to be a dad. So when I had Kieran, I gave him everything. The lifestyle I was leading at the time wasn't good. I was doing stuff I shouldn't have been doing. But he had all the best of gear. He had the best clays. He got all the best football stuff, all the straps, his Xbox, PlayStations, whatnots. He had everything. And I thought that's all you had to do, was just give him everything. And I now realise, looking back, that I wasn't emotionally available for him. I wasn't there, and I can see how we're speaking to Kieran now over the last couple of years. It's broken that cycle now with Kieran as well, because he understands that as well now, and I understand that. So I'm a lot different with my girls than what I was with, and I'll tell you what, since I came along Wave and found out that the research and the education and in therapy, I've been a totally different dad to what I was with my girls and JJ than what I was with Kieran. And I'm the first to put my hand up and say that I wasn't emotionally available with him. I didn't know what to do with him until he was 12. And then Ken, things like fishing and hunting. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what to do. I just buy them whatever they need, and that's it. And that's really, and I thought I was a perfect dad. I really did. I thought I was a perfect dad, and I realized that I wasn't. But as bad as that might sound, I'm breaking the cycle. I am breaking the cycle. So, and that's the main thing, and that's what counts.
I think that's a great example, Jay, of the fact that you can truly break those cycles at any point in your life, and you can build resilience at any point in your life. I include Kieran in that. Of, obviously, as I said, there's those critical windows of opportunity. If you can give the foundation, that's wonderful, but that's not a reason to assume you can't do something later on, or you can't support people later on as well, and start to meet those emotional needs and start to teach those skills and boundaries and everything else that I will be coming straight back to, Rob. But Claire, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share before that?
I just wanted to say that for me, growing up with abuse and trauma, I learned from a very young age that, to me, love was pain. You love something, you lost it, or you love something and it hurt you. So I think that's where my detachment came from with the kids, because I was just so afraid to, love them, that something was going to go wrong. It was just like every day something's going to go wrong. And I think it's the most precious thing you can ever have as a child. I look at the little one now, and the amount of love he has, the time we spend together, the day trips, just those little moments first thing in the morning, 5 minutes after school, 5 minutes before he goes to bed, where he's got that one-on-one time. And I just wish I'd have had that as a child. And I still struggle with eye contact now after all these years. Like there was years I went with not even being able to lift my head off the floor when I was out walking in the street, head down, and I'd be on my way. And there's just so many things to come with the emotional neglect. It's really, really sad.
Thanks, Claire. I think that's a wonderful example. If I've glanced at the time whilst you were talking, Claire, and I think if we want to make sure that we can fit everything, I'm just going to quickly share screen for a testimony that we've got from a Hearts of Ace member who isn't joining us live today, as we always want to include everyone in bringing their expertise forward. And to anyone who might be watching this, who is part of the Hearts of Ace group who wants to get involved, please know that you can come on live, you can have a chat with us. You've always been supported. You'll be supported by me, supported by the group. But also, if you just want to send in your story in any way, do feel free to. And there is one story I was sent in this week that I haven't included, but I have saved it for the emotional abuse live, as it had elements of both. But I think it was really will make much more of a difference to the world if it's shared properly there with the time for proper discussion. So let me just put that here and read that out for a moment. From a baby, I was dearly loved from my grandparents' and parents' perspective. After losing one of those safe people at a young age, I felt totally ignored and alone. My parents shut down. There was no longer free for hugs, love, or even considerations, as I was just left to my own devices. After a while, I figured out the only way that I could get attention was for the negative behavior I was displaying, and even though I finally had their attention, the attention I was getting wasn't the correct kind. My family were not emotionally available. There was trauma and disruption and dysfunction, and no matter what happened, they just couldn't connect. Happy times, sad times, there was just an angry void always there. Many years on, the void is still there. I feel totally isolated from them, feeling empathy and any sort of feeling towards anything that's going on in my life. If I have a problem, there is no point going to them for support, as it's non-existent. Sadly, later on in my adult life, I went on to become emotionally unavailable for my own children, something that haunts me deep in my heart. Since working with Hearts of Ace and the Wave Trust, I am in a much better place and have changed my parenting skills around for the better. My children now have a safe parent they can come to, so we can fix things together and come up with solutions. And the main thing I always provide is hugs and love and emotion, the unconditional kind. So I just wanted to make sure that we had found the time to include that as well, as I think it's so important that we're really hearing that. And I think that just really echoes a lot of what all of you had been saying today. I also, just casting a quick eye to the comments, can see that Angela is happily promoting how to become an ambassador. So please do join us as well if you are interested, if you're listening to this. We are moving things forward. We're starting to make a real difference. But what will keep us going is having more passionate people starting to spread the word. So please do check out our website if you are interested. So yeah, I think it's time to go back to what I was saying with Rob about boundaries. And I think it's so important to understand that when we talk about what is necessary to build someone's resilience, we need love, we need structure, but we need high expectations, but we need those boundaries as well. And that really helps people later in life. It's a key form of self-care. We're always talking about it when we're talking about trauma-informed approaches. In fact, it's one of the only things we repeat 3 times on one of our slides. And I think it's so important to understand that it can be hard to set boundaries when you've never been taught it. And it can be hard to understand that you need to set boundaries sometimes with yourself as well, and need to pass that on. So I think I just wanted to really highlight that because it's a key emotional skill, and it can be something that you've definitely missed out on if you did experience some form of emotional neglect, and that will have repercussions because you need to be able to set boundaries within relationships, at work, with yourself, in so many situations in life. So yeah, I just want to take a moment to actually properly acknowledge that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that that are worth bringing up.
I'd just like to say the boundaries is very important for me. I was always a yes person, always said yes, could never say no to anything. And 3 years ago when I started recovery, I realized that I had to put boundaries into place to be able to get to where I wanted to be and to get healthy and, you know, have a healthy mind. And no was really one of the hardest words that I ever had to learn to say. And I still struggle with it now sometimes. But boundaries are so important. They've literally changed my life. So yeah.
Thanks, Claire.
Same as, I mean, going back to that childhood, I had no boundaries. I do remember being told I had to go to bed. I mean, as a child, it's sort of part of that wrestle I'd had. That wasn't my issue. My issue was, it was like, I didn't know when, like in the household I was growing up in, there was so much anger in that they would get me excited. And then when I didn't stop being excited, I was hurt. So it was like, hold on a minute, you got me excited. There wasn't an explanation. I think it's if alcohol was fueled or it was just the anger within the household. But I'm going to jump a little bit into the future, because it came when I was in my sort of 15, 16, when I was getting in trouble with the police, because I just didn't know when to stop. I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know that. I don't know if I knew what was right or wrong at 16. I ran away from home nearly my whole childhood. I was always running away from home. You know, it wasn't even running away from home. It was like not coming home from school. It was like, oh, look, shiny thing. And I would just go off, because it was just, everything was better than being at home. But when I was getting in trouble with the police, it was, you know, someone would say stop. And it was, I didn't know where stop, and I didn't know what stop looked like. So I carried on to see how far I could push stop, or see what stop looked like, until it was, right, we're nicking you. Or it was like when I was going to, I remember standing in court and the judge said something and I sort of mocked him. And it was like, why did I allow my lips to move? You know, I'm looking as an adult, looking back as a child. And I'm thinking, you know, if only I could have held that little child and just said, oh my God, dude, shut up. Because, you know, I had no understanding when I was living homeless, or when I was living with my sister, or when I was at that, I pushed it. My sister, I was on the judge's remand at my sister's house, and she was trying to stop me from going outside because I wasn't allowed, but I would push it to see, because I had no boundaries. It was just to see how far I could always push it. I just didn't know what to do, and it was, my skill set was just not there. My skill set was just not there. And like Jay, I was the comedy one in my house. So because nobody hits a funny person. Full stop. Never, no one does. Because actually, funny people, because I knew if I was doing the jokes, then nobody would hurt me. So again, it's just the skills I was learning as a child were the wrong skills.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, Rob, I think those are some wonderful examples of some of the consequences of not being taught those boundaries. You immediately reminded me of something that happened a couple of weeks ago in my family. Just with the word stop that you were saying there as an example for boundaries. I was tickling my little brother. That's all that was happening. And he was shouting, stop, stop, stop. And I instantly, automatically stopped. And then, is that a game stop or a real stop? Just to work, just to work out, are you just saying that as part of the game of the tickle to run away and you want me to chase you? Or is this genuinely whatever? And that just came completely naturally to me and to him, and he was immediately able to say, no, it's a game stop, it's fine. And we happily, continued on or whatever. I threw him at a sofa, all that kind of fun sibling dynamic. But because we both had the tools to be able to say, I can ask about boundaries and he can set the boundary, we can trust each other to stop it. And obviously within the household as children, we're trying to work out where the limits are, we're trying to work out where the boundaries are. I think a lot of the time we behave differently at home than we will at school or with grandparents or in different situations, because that is often the place where you test, where are the limits? How far can I go? What can I do? What are the consequences there? Where is it met? Where does it change things? And so I think that is a big part of the emotional development that we all go through. So I think that was a really good example there, Rob. Thanks. Jay, I know that you haven't come in on this one yet. I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
Yeah, boundaries were just no go. There wasn't any boundaries. When you grow up, like I told you, when there's murder in the family, and then my granddad does what he does to me because my dad's not there for me. There's no boundaries. There is no boundaries. And then when you grow up into an adult, when at the point when I said, the system's failed me, it was I had no boundaries. There was absolutely none. I got me in a lot of trouble. It's just like Rob says. It's just there's no boundaries in place. People tried to teach it at school for whatever. My mum, but because of what happened, there was no boundaries in the world. There was just, it was limitless. It was anything and everything could and would happen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it really is, boundaries are what stops it from just being chaos sometimes, I think, in different ways. Conscious of the time, I'm trying to decide whether to have a final statement or to see if I had another slide I wanted to share. I think I'm going to share it just quickly. We might go 5 minutes over if you guys are all right. Feel free to let me know if you guys need to run off, though. And I wanted to highlight on the left here, what we have is the always available trusted adult that we've hinted at here and there throughout the live stream today. And that's the fact that it sometimes takes one positive relationship to make the biggest difference. So you can see here that they compared people with 4 or more ACEs who either had that always available adult or didn't have that always available adult. And you can see that the people without it were 3 times more likely to be heavy drinkers and to have a poor diet or to be smoking daily, for example. Whereas those with constant support didn't. And it's really that kind of emotional groundwork that makes that different. It's that attuned adult and secure adult. And I'll take that even a step further and say that if you have the equivalent of the almost available adult at any point in your life, that is what helps you start to heal. That is what we mean when we say healing happens through relationships. You start to kind of overlay a secure pattern of attachment, a secure pattern in your brain circuits. And there's some further protective factors there that I'm not going to spend the time on, just because I think I'd rather get some wonderful insight and expertise from the Hearts of ACE members who are on today. But I will say you can find this infographic on our website if you do want to look at it in more detail. So yeah, I think as we're probably about 5 minutes off, do any of you have a final message that you'd want people to remember from today?
For me, I think I know the people who are online, we've got a great opportunity here to get the word out there, make that difference, because we owe it to our children. Yes, we may have made a few mistakes. We may have made a few choices that weren't naturally the given route that we're meant to be taken. But we have an opportunity to break that cycle. And I think one of the things that I've worked on very, very hard is breaking that cycle. We can't change what's been done. It's done. We can think about it and we can look at what we're different if you wanted to, but it's too late. It's about now. It's what we do now. It's all the decisions and all the breakthroughs in life we do now is what's most important. You know, when we're tucking up our children into bed, that extra 5 minutes that we didn't play on our phones, or that extra little bit of time that we give them when we're reading a book, or that little bit of time we explain about, you know, we've just come through 2 years of the worst time in our shared experience lifetime. You know, from parent and child, we can share the experience of saying, oh, do you remember that 2 years of COVID? You know, it's and how do children feel? How does my son feel with this wars going on? But actually listening to him. And you know what? My son's only 9, but I tell you what, he's smart, and he really cares about the world around him. And do you know what I've learned? I've learned that I've taught him how to care about the world around him, because even though he's judging me on my things I do now, he's not judging me on the things I did 9 years ago. You know, he sees all the things I do now. He sees that I stand up for what's right. He sees that when I walk through my local town, people say hello and stop and want to speak to me. They don't have to speak to me. They're not scared to speak to me because they want to. So actually, we have a duty to our children to I think I just did it there with Angela's statement there. We give them hope that actually that the decisions that they make, they're loved all the way. As you were.
Rob, you have touched on the one thing I forgot to mention today, which is absolutely crucial. So thank you. We've talked a lot about attunement, about serve and return, how that lays the groundwork for a lot of our future development. But we haven't said how it is actually what allows empathy to develop. Empathy is not a given; it is a skill, and it occurs through attunement and observing how the adults around you react to suffering. And given that empathy is the greatest inhibitor of the propensity to violence, it's absolutely crucial to everything we want to do here with WAVE and the 70-30 campaign. So absolutely, you know, I'm not at all surprised that your son is really showing that care for the world around him. Babies can show empathy by as young as 1 year if they have been taught it, if they have had that kind of positive interaction. So I'm very glad you reminded me to bring that up at the end of today's session, because I do hope that might be my takeaway for today. If we want to create people in a world who care, we have to make sure we're meeting their emotional needs. I think that might be my takeaway for the day. Jay, do you want to go next?
Yeah, my takeaway, I hope, is understanding the differences between emotional neglect, inadvertent, advertent, and emotional abuse, and also, as well, as I touched on, you know, I'm battling depression and a lot of things myself with grief, and I recognise that I'm not there sometimes for my kids, and it's if other people can just take that away and know if they're struggling with their mental health, if they can just, you know, try and be that wee bit more self-aware and understand that it's not their fault, but, you know, once you're made aware of it, then you can try and do something about it and help the kids, help your kids, and it's never get up hope, you know, never get up hope.
Thank you, Jay. Claire, do you want to close things off for today?
Yeah, I just want to say that for me, the best part of my recovery has been taking accountability for my actions and forgiving other people for things that happened because they didn't have the tools like I didn't have the tools, and just basically learning how to teach my little one love and compassion and empathy, and making sure he cares about things that are going on around him. And it's just so important to break this cycle for our children, for other people's children, for future generations of our families. And I just want to say it's never too late. You can always turn it around. It's a painful process, but it's one that's well worth it. And yeah, I just think like we've got to break this cycle for the future generations.
Wonderful, Claire. And that's a perfect message to end it on. I'm just going to highlight, I think, Angela's messages at the end here, because she's doing all of my work for me. So thank you so much. I think, once again, never give up hope. I think it's really worth putting that up there twice. If you are interested in becoming a 70-30 ambassador and joining our team in really advocating for these changes, please do go to our website, www.wavetrust.org. And if you have also experienced ACEs or other forms of trauma and you want some support, peer support, please do also join Hearts of ACE. You can email heartsoface@wavetrust.org there, and you'll be put in touch with this wonderful team that can be there for you as, you know, you finally reach out and might start that healing journey yourself. So please do reach out. But yeah, I think that's all for tonight. Thank you so much for everyone who stuck around for the whole hour, and for everyone who might watch this in replay as well. But I hope you have a wonderful evening. Have a good night.